Hello and welcome to Doni Jones Live. I am Doni Jones, your host, and so excited to be with you guys again this week. Today on our show, as you know, we're always trying to bring you somebody in the community that's doing great things, making a difference, and of course, today we'll be doing the same thing. And today on our show, we have Pastor Ron Bonner. I know people see, like, he's laughing because we talked about how people sometimes say Bonner, but I knew better to say Bonner. Welcome to our show, Pastor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And well, thank you for being here. It's funny because sometimes I go back and look at our shows and I go, man, I always say I'm excited. But with today's age of young people doing activism and, you know, us trying to ride on the coattails of people such as yourself that are out there doing activism, it's always an honor for me to meet people that were like the trailblazers, and I consider you one of the trailblazers, Pastor. So thank you for what you're doing in our community.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yes. And for those of you that don't know what he's doing in our community, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing right now? Or I know obviously you're a pastor and you're an activist, but what makes you who you are today?
It's always based on the experiences that people have.
Yeah.
And being able to find a way to express yourself in such a way, if you're willing to make a change. Some people retreat and they don't do anything, and others find a spiritual energy that says things have to be different. And so you look at your own experience and you know that other people are being impacted the same way you are negatively. Right. And so you want to make a difference. You want to make this world better for future generations. And when you have children and grandchildren, and even a great-grandchild, then you really want to be engaged to try and create safe space for them to grow. So part of it is developing a place for your people to be able to grow and be able to fully realize themselves. And so you do it also for the community, because you just can't do it for yourself selfishly. You have to do it for others.
And you're obviously doing that. How did you get started? Where are you from?
I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. Grew up in Chicago public school systems, went to the University of Illinois at Chicago. My undergraduate major was actually criminal justice.
Oh my goodness.
I worked for the city of Chicago for a while. I worked in corporate America. But the activism really comes through my understanding of the gospel, and that God, Jesus, is telling us that we have to love our neighbors.
That's right.
And love is not selected neighbors, not neighbors who are doing well, but all of our neighbors.
Exactly.
And we have to try and create that beloved community that Dr. King talked about, which to me can sometimes look at what paradise or what the kingdom or realm of God is about. But it's a community where all people are treated with dignity.
I think our politicians need to learn that.
But we don't have that in our society.
That's true. We don't.
You know, we have too many divisions. A couple of weeks ago, I did a piece on Peace Starts With Me, and I really talked about what peace is not.
Right.
And you can't beat people into peace. That's oppression. Right. And when you have oppression, you also sow the seeds for revenge, retaliation, and hate. So it's about how do we create a world that God has called us to create, where we have dominion and not domination.
How do we create that world, especially looking at how things are today? And once again, going back to the fact that you're a pastor, which you're making a difference in impacting lives. You're an activist, you're making a difference in impacting lives, and you're actually speaking up on a local and global scale because you're using your voice. But what can we do on a day-to-day basis to see those changes? Because I see that we've grown a lot over the last 50 years in this country. I've seen progress in our community. I mean, the fact that you and I are sitting here espousing what we have to say and saying what we have to say and feeling confident about saying it, there's progress that's been made, but it's not enough progress. So what do we do?
We, on the individual level, we're doing what we're doing now, is having conversation. But the key to moving the needle towards racial reconciliation, away from the polarization that is so prevalent in our society today, is to have conversation with people. But we can't have conversations with people whom we like. We have to have conversations with people whom we would never, ever have conversations with. Martin Marty, or Professor Martin Marty, he talks about heretical friendships. And actually in my book, we talk about how do we get there is by having conversations, these heretical conversations with people who would not normally be our friends, engaging them, finding quote unquote common ground, and then being able to move to address some of the serious issues
Okay.
in our society.
I want to piggyback on that. This is your book, actually, right here, right? No Bigotry Allowed.
Yes.
Losing the Spirit of Fear.
Yes.
And I think fear is a lot of what keeps us separated.
Yes.
How do you have that conversation with somebody, let's say a rural person, most likely in most cases a white person, Confederate flag, doesn't like black people, has preconceived notions based on stereotypes and based on maybe their own past history in a few instances. How do you have that difficult conversation to where they open their mind, or we bridge the gap? How do you have that?
You have to find some things that are commonalities. I have a friend who's very right-wing. I am positioned as a left-wing person. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we have in common, other than a love for humanity,
right.
and we have developed a sense of trust because we have been in so many conversations together around these issues of race, even though we still politically are at different ends of the spectrum. We both share a history with the NRA.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I was a member of the National Riflemen's Association. Mm-hmm. So that sort of pulled down some of his barriers, some of his walls, because he hasn't met that many black people who are part of the NRA. So we had something in common.
Right.
In fact, we got to the point where after one of our discussions, we have a group called Honest Conversations. Mm-hmm. About 10 of us who have met over the past couple of years discussing serious issues around race.
Right.
At one of our last meetings, we actually, after the meeting, after the lunch, went out on his rifle range and fired live ammunition.
Right.
You couldn't do that the first day.
Well, no, you can't do that the first day, and it does take time.
So that's the key.
Okay. So finding some type of common ground, but even after that common ground, when the right-wing people that vote that direction, they're voting for policies that impact our communities in a negative way.
Right.
That impact education for our communities and even their own communities in a negative way. So I see us having the conversation, but what do we do to get the needle to move to where they can see the impact of what they vote for and what they do and how it impacts us? That's my concern.
That comes from education. I've been working with a congregation in Noonan, and I saw the pastor yesterday who says, "You can't come back anymore." He's the reason I can't come back anymore because he's tired of people quoting me. His congregation, which is predominantly white.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has said, "Ron, thank you, because my people now understand and they can see their white privilege. And now they have a different lens to view their behaviors through."
That's good.
So it's working, again, it's working, having these conversations.
And more of us need to have those conversations.
And helping people to see and not being so dismissive. I understand it can be an energy drain, but it is important to have these conversations with people to help them see how the society is created. The book Animal Farm actually sets up how our society is created. We see it in Animal Farm, and it's what Audre Lorde talks about when she says you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. But you got to understand how the tools work.
But speaking of the tools, and I'm glad you mentioned the NRA, because I put a post up a while ago that said, you know what, if all eligible African American men decided to join the NRA, there would be gun regulation in 24 hours.
Oh, yeah.
But why aren't we doing that? I mean, even though we may not have interest, we could use their rules to impact things that affect our community as well as the nation. Just by doing something like that. Okay, join the NRA. There's a lot of African Americans that love hunting, that love guns, that are, pro-gun sports. Why don't we pick up the baton and go, okay, fine. Even though I may not necessarily want to do this, I'm going to join this because it'll push the needle. It'll move the needle a little bit. Why don't you think we do little things like that can turn into big things that'll impact us?
Because we're told that's not what we should do, and we sometimes tend to buy into the wrong narrative. I was sharing with a friend the other day about viruses. Viruses have more impact when they're on the inside of a body and not on the outside.
That's right.
So what you're saying is, yes, let black people join the organization. I have no problems with that. I think I think that's a great solution, because then you have voice with inside. You can be that virus that can impact that body, and then you can shift the NRA's positions
Okay.
on several things, especially like having automatic weapons to go
Yes.
squirrel shooting.
That's
That
right.
is ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous. Well, we're going to take a break real quick, and then we're going to come back. But before we take a break, how do we get in contact with you?
You can get in contact with me through my email address, which is P as in Paul, S as in Sarah, 3651 at AOL.com. That's PS3651 at AOL.com. Or you can even call me on my phone, which is 404-718-9711. Again, 404-718-9711.
And how do we get that book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble. It's also available in local bookstores. So they
Wonderful.
can order it for you.
They can order online. Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back to finish our conversation with Pastor Ron Bonner. Welcome back. We are here talking with Pastor Ron Bonner about his activism, about his ministry, and about making a difference in our community that will last a lifetime. Getting back to what we were talking about, how we can do simple things that can have a lasting impact, such as joining the NRA, or such as going into rooms that we may not be welcome at and having difficult conversations. What are some other things that we can do as a community to start changing the direction of where we're going right now?
Look for things that are of interest to the individual. You mentioned schools earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, our schools are definitely in decline.
They are.
And declining schools is a way to drive down the value, property values,
That's
and
right.
drive down values of communities. It's been said that at the end of enslavement, black people had 2% of the wealth of the country.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying that we have 2% of the wealth of the country right now. We have more income. I mean, we have what, $1
But we
trillion
don't have-
in income,
Yeah.
but we don't have real wealth. We don't have
And we spend more of our
property and
disposable
things.
income than other races also.
We spend all of our disposable income, it seems like.
Yes, sir.
And we spend it on products and things that we could control.
Yeah.
But we don't. We give our
That's
money
right.
away. One of my friends once said is that we have a cash flow problem. I said, no, we don't have a cash flow problem. We have
Yeah.
a cash retention problem.
There you go.
And so monies come in, but they go out
Exactly.
immediately.
They
And-
don't even circulate in our community.
No.
And that's something. But you had mentioned the hierarchy. And I wanted you to kind of tap on that a little bit and how that has worked in our society to keep people down.
In the book, again, Animal House and Audre Lorde, what we see is status is created in our society. What we now refer to as the 1% was once landowners. And what that 1% does is it creates that status that people want to move towards, strive towards. But what they do is they create a level of protection, whether it's police departments or militaries, to protect them and protect their interests and basically to protect their wealth.
Yeah.
I've said that white supremacy is actually a wealth supremacy system. And so that is protected by military, it's protected by police. Next, then you build a pedagogy. And that pedagogy instructs people to believe that these people are entitled to what they have. And it creates the narratives that create fear so that we are at war with other people. Whether it's your neighbor, whether it's a person who looks different than you, or a person who lives on the other side of a line drawn on a map. But that pedagogy is there to create these narratives that help to create the polarization and maintain polarization in our society. And then for people who adhere to those narratives, then they are rewarded.
That's right. But they're not rewarded financially though, and they're not rewarded socially. They're rewarded with a feeling, like, because it becomes almost clannish, where if I stay right here, it's comfortable. If I step outside of this zone, I'm uncomfortable. And if I'm uncomfortable, I've got to find my way back. And so it's like a vicious circle. I mention that is because when I came up, my father is Islamic. And there was a lot that I agreed with him on, and there's a lot that I didn't agree with him on. But a lot of it had to do with his misinterpretation of the ideology he came up under. But what I did get out of it was that nobody could hold me down, that it's time for me to go get mine. That as a kid, I remember as young as 3, 4, 5 years old, don't go get a job. Don't ever go get a job. Don't even think about getting a job. Don't ever have a job. And I think I got a job when I was 6. I was working with him for a while. Got a job working in retail because he wasn't paying me right. So I was like, okay, well, you said don't go to the job, but you ain't paying me, so I'm going to get a job. I only did that for a short period of time before I realized, even though I was working hard, I didn't have control over my time and my income. So I eventually became an entrepreneur based on what he told me. Well, not everybody in our community is told that. And we've got to figure out a way, I think, and I think it starts in the church. It starts in schools and it starts in churches, where we stop expecting somebody to do something for us. Immigrants come over to this country and they're not looking for a job, and if they do get a job, they get a job as like a busboy or a landscaper, and then they become owners of something, or they become higher up in the company to where they have control over that. How can we implement that in our community when there's only a few of us being told what I was told when I was a kid? Not every kid was told don't ever go get a job.
Yeah, my understanding is that still 10% of our community are entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's really 10% of the larger community that are entrepreneurs.
Right.
So the same percentage is just they've got history and they've got a system that supports them. That doesn't support entrepreneurs of color. So they tend to be more successful longer, and they have a process of sustainability.
And we're talking about immigrants, or are you talking about whites?
Immigrants. I'm talking about the dominant culture.
Okay.
Primarily. You have to remember, Social Security was not designed for us. GI Bill was not designed for us. There was redlining. These all sorts of things did not help us be able to use our ideas the same way other cultures are able to use their ideas. One of the things, though, that people sometimes miss this about jobs and why jobs are so important in the black community is because of the vagrancy laws of the 1800s. What kept black men out of jail was the fact
having
that they
a job.
had a job.
That's true.
Not being an entrepreneur.
That's true.
And if you go to the lynching museum, majority of black people who were lynched often were entrepreneurs.
That's true.
So that's where we get this mentality about have a job. Now, in our time, we can refocus again
and I
on
think
being
you should have a
entrepreneurs.
job. I really do, because not everybody was made to be an entrepreneur. But I say that when I mentioned how my dad drilled that into me, I didn't go out wanting something from somebody because I felt like I had to go get it myself. Most of our society has a job. And that's okay, that's a good thing, but do something that's gonna empower you and impact your life. That's what I mean. So don't get it twisted. If you got a job, keep your job. Don't be going out quitting your job because I said so. But anyway, I wanna kind of talk a little bit about the role that the black church plays in moving the ball forward. And what's the status? Let's talk about the status of the black church. That's what I really want to say. What's the status of the black church right now?
The black church is not a monolith. We talk about it as if it's a monolithic organization or organism where all people are in sync, unified, and doing something together. There are elements of the black church that are spread out over diverse methodologies, theologies, ideologies. I want to say the mythical black church is a black church that would have come out of the prophetic traditions of like Vernon Johns and Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, church that understands how our society is working against us and is giving people hope so that they can resist the evil that is part of our society and want to make a difference, want to improve their neighborhoods, want to create jobs by being entrepreneurs so that people in the community can have a way to have a meaningful life and worthwhile work. So that is what the black church used to do. Now the black church is all over the place, and Sunday I made a comment about we have too many congregations that don't want to deal with the social issues of our
they
day.
don't.
What they want the pastor to do is talk about going to heaven and having grace.
Right.
Unfortunately, in many of those cases, heaven is Neiman Marcus, and grace is their favorite sales clerk who every now and then will let them use their employee discount.
Right, right.
So we have this misconception, and so what we do is we buy into that pedagogy of what is proper in this society so that we can be rewarded and actually be rewarded financially so that we can live life very comfortably, but we live it sometimes at the expense of others because we don't care about anyone but ourselves. The black church used to be a place where people could come together and
but that's
feel
how we
loved.
started. After in slavery, that's how it started. We congregated and felt love. We congregated to get through the next day. We congregated because it was a place where we were free to be ourselves and impact the next generation. Somewhere along the line, our pastors became, and I know you're not in this vein, so I know you're not in this vein, but our pastors became pimps. And I see, and I'm not afraid to say that because I see it. And, you know, my dad used to say, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, if your pastor looks like a pimp, he's probably pimping y'all. But people, we don't want to talk about that. And there's nothing wrong with being successful. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pulling from the people but not giving back to the community. There's a church right now in Atlanta that has been there 20 years, one of the wealthiest churches in this country, but the surrounding area off of Old National, one of the surrounding areas around Old National is still poverty stricken. You know, it's still dealing with joblessness. And it's like we're oblivious to that. And so when do we get to a point where we say, okay, it's cool for you to be successful. It's great for you to have a jet. I want you to have an abuse, because I like nice stuff. I ain't gonna get it twisted. But I have a responsibility to give back. When does that happen? When do we as a congregation say, wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa. We've sowed into this church. What are you doing to sow into the community? And I'm not talking about one program that helped like 50 single moms get a little car. I'm talking about impacting the community, buying up the real estate, helping people, you know, get their finances straight, buy homes, you know, buying up boarded up buildings. When do we do that? Long-term systemic change.
There are, believe it or not, there are congregations who have done that. The problem is,
I bet your congregation does that.
I wish ours is too small to do that, but we are trying to work with some coalitions to do that. And we're trying to work with some of our larger congregations in our context to do some things around housing. So yes, but there are congregations that have money in Chicago. I know they have bought up housing development so that people can have decent places to live, who stand and fight to create legislation. My home church in Chicago, we actually built 2 senior citizens' homes while we were trying to build our sanctuary so that we could help some people. But it takes, again, coalitions. We have to build.
But I feel like we're the ones
together.
that have to hold our pastors accountable.
Well, you know,
like the congregation, like if that's where their income comes from. So what's wrong with people waking up and going, listen, man, I want you to live large. I want you to have your pretty rings, and I want you to have your little jet if that's what you want. But this community needs help.
People don't go to church often who live in the community. They live out from the church.
Okay.
And so they come to church on worship. They come to get fed. Sometimes they're not being well fed, but they are being fed something. And often it's because our society, again, is polarized, and people are selfish. So I'll give you a message about your own independent wealth, what God has in store for you. You know, I'm going to talk about Abraham. There's only one Abraham, but the message comes across that I can be Abraham. There's only one. You know, and so people become very selfish, and they're not concerned about the people whom they drive by on a Sunday morning to get to their church. So the pastors do need to do that, and the people should. But you have too many pastors who are, again, preaching these motifs of heaven and individual wealth, and you don't have to be responsible. There's no responsibility to your neighbor. And so people just come and leave wanting to better themselves, but they don't care about bettering anybody else.
Biblical entertainment. It feels good, though. It feels good. You know, and it sounds good. And we're going to take a break again, but I will say this: I've fallen victim to. Well, I'm never a victim, but I've chosen to be entertained and not be impacted at certain times. And I know I'm doing it. I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm not getting any meat out of this, but this is super entertaining to see him jump from verse to verse and make all these runs, you know, with all the scriptures that he knows. But this person sitting next to me has been in this congregation for 40 years, and her house is falling apart, and the church says they can't help her because it doesn't fall under the benevolence fund. Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about that bother me.
Yeah,
and bother other people.
And they should bother you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor, once again for joining us.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
thank
Jones.
you all for joining us. And we'll be back next week. But you guys, please get in touch with this gentleman because he's doing great things. He's making a difference. And also become an activist in your own world. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be just speaking up for somebody at church or speaking up for somebody at your job or standing up for something you believe in. Look at your own life and go, how can I impact? It may not be on the same level as what we're doing, but in your own way, you can make a difference. And I didn't really mention that that's our seed, but that's going to be our seed for the day, is that you go out, make a difference, be an activist in your life, and go forward and impact others. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Doni Jones. This is Pastor Ron Bonner. And once again, thank you for being with us this week. Bye-bye.